Hey everyone, welcome back to another free-to-play build series. I'm super excited about this one. It is kind of an autumn-themed Victorian home. Autumn Manor is what we're calling it, as you can see in the thumbnail. It is a little bit of a long one, not crazy, but so, get your snacks. Snacks are important. But before we get into that, reminder, any subscribes are greatly appreciated. We finally got over 150, which is wild. And I would love to keep raising that number. Also, any follows on Twitch or stopping by stream would be greatly appreciated as well. I do stream weekly, like almost every single day on Twitch, so make sure that you do check me out over there if you want to see some build stuff that it doesn't necessarily make it to here. But yeah, so welcome in to the Autumn Manor, which sounds very dramatic. But a friend of mine actually named it. I knew that I wanted to do a Victorian build because I was actually talking to her about, I just like kind of giving her some tricks on Victorian style-ish homes. Now, I will say that when we were talking about it, we had access to a bunch of the paid packs. And I was like, it could be kind of fun to do a free-to-play Victorian home. I will say this was a lot harder than the last free-to-play build. I think because I had more of a hard theme and I knew of things that like I own in game that I just didn't want to use because I really do like making the free-to-play content, but it does mean that this build doesn't necessarily end where I had intended it to, but I still really like it, honestly. I think that it's something that is relatively easy to replicate, and again, you can do it completely free, pending when you've played the game. So let's just cover that real quick. We cover it in our free-to-play videos, but just a reminder that free-to-play means that there's nothing in this like game or in this build costs money. That being said, it does mean that sometimes you have to be on the game at a certain time. There might be login rewards. There might be different in-game currencies that you can grind out to get certain items. There might be just like playing the game to get certain blueprints for stuff. So do keep that in mind. I know some people like sometimes get confused or like, oh, I don't have access to that. Unfortunately, sometimes they will offer up past rewards, but they're not always offered up. So I'm hoping that they do expand on the loot crates that exist in the season shops, which would be one of my biggest recommendations to y'all if you are looking for just some additional free-to-play items. Make sure that you do go to the season shop. So when you go to your scenario progress on the top right of your screen, there will actually be a season shop option. And there are new loot crates that they added in. Some of them are build items. Some of them are just like character customization, stickers and stuff like that. But there are loot crates that you can roll, essentially, for Mitsuko marks. And Mitsuko marks you get a couple different ways in game, but the main way that you'll get them is by completing different scenario progress challenges. So definitely make sure that you check all of that stuff out. Now back to this build. So I will say, I was trying to make it small. It's not small. It didn't end up small. I don't know. It just kind of escalated. I was doing this late on a Friday night and just kind of listening to music and building. And when I have a tendency to just build, I get a little carried away. But that being said, it is cozy. So I feel like my last free-to-play build was a little bit more open. You will see some similarities as far as the structure. I think the height is relatively similar. Some of the open walkways is similar. But in this particular build, because I did want to keep that Victorian theme, I'm going with a few more curves. I'm going with more like railing detail and pillar detail. And I'm also trying to close in some places where I would normally leave them open. I'm a big fan of open concept building. It's just something that I really like. I would love to have an open concept home myself. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a combo of both. So if you're like, that's not small, Flea, that's something I hear a lot. I'm not gonna lie. People call me out on it all the time. But it's still relatively, simple to build. And I think that this is gonna be a little bit easier to follow along than some of the other videos that I've posted in the past, especially if you are a newer builder. Speaking of, this was my first time building in Eternaland. If you're wondering, where the heck is she? What is this place? You'll eventually see me moving some trees. Why can she move trees? This is Eternaland. I always said that I was going to save Eternaland for if I ever hit a wall of not knowing what to do in the regular game, and I just never touched it. But I'm realizing that Eternaland is actually going to be a really great way for me to be able to do build tutorials for you. And I also think that it's actually a really great tool if you're trying to learn how to build. Now, if you're a brand new player, obviously you're not going to have a lot of resources, because basically what happens is as you complete a season, the resources that you have left over are what goes into your Eternaland and what allows you to build items. So you're definitely going to want to have at least one season under your belt before you get in depth in Eternaland. But it's a really cool concept for building. There's no real pressure as far as the elements of whatever server you might be on. Like, you're not going to be afraid you're going to freeze to death. You're not going to be afraid there's a monster that's going to attack your house, or other people if you're a PvP person. So I actually think it's a really great tool to use to learn to build. And I don't believe there are structure limits. I know that there is an overall amount of things you're allowed to build in Eternaland, I think, but it does give you a little bit more flexibility. That being said, I don't know the total amount of structures on this builds. I'm pretty sure it will fit within what the required amount is in just like regular Once Human, which is 700 is normal, unless you have the I think it's the intense defense mimetic that gives you an extra 800. But that's why when I was building this, you'll see when it comes to the walls, I actually used a lot more full walls than I normally do. I like to do a lot of quarter walls, eighth walls, just kind of play up with the structure a little bit. I thought it fit more with the Victorian theme, and I think that it also just made me make sure that I was going to have enough that you guys could replicate this in game if you wanted to. So another thing I will say is that this build does change in the part 2. So this is part 1. We did mention that at the beginning. There is a part 2. The part 2 is technically the interior decorating, but what happens a lot of the time, I don't know about y'all, but when I interior decorate, I change my mind a lot. So we end up kind of opening up a whole area where the workroom ends up being. We add additional porch space. I add more walls to close things off. So you will see that if you watch the next video. I do think that this ends in a pretty cool spot, like a pretty okay spot. But I think where it ends in the part 2, which will be uploaded soon after this, is actually much better. This one's doable. This one's okay. But I think the final product ends up being really just like a good build. This is like an okay build. I think that ends up being a good build. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you have the time. Have not edited it yet, so I don't know exactly how long it's going to be. Probably a little bit longer. The record time was a little bit longer. Always takes me longer to do it decorating. And I don't know why. Statistically, it shouldn't, but it did. Also here we have, because I didn't want to use too many half walls, I was trying to make this framing of the pitched roof work here. I end up just putting a full wall there. You'll see me delete and put down and delete and put down. It's because the way that the upper corner pieces work is they will kind of latch onto certain portions of walls, depending the size of the wall. And you can see there I have 2 full walls essentially on either side. One is technically half of a vertical wall, but it still reads the same as the full wall if you're connecting something to the side, so I just give up on that. And here I am, I'm kind of trying to stick with as many pitched roofs as I can, because I do feel like that I don't know, it just speaks Victorian to me. Also, one thing you might have seen there with the quarter slanted roofs, sometimes the actual thing will not connect to the bottom, but it'll connect to the top. So that's one of those little tips and tricks of if you're trying to make something work, just try it a little bit in a different spot. You never really know. It might still not work, but in that particular situation, it did work. Here I am trying to figure out the roofing here. I thought I was going to do its own piece, because again, I'm trying to think of Victorian builds, which some of them are symmetrical, but for the most part they're not. So I was trying to add some variety to the roof and make sure that it's not super symmetrical. In my mind, the front porch, both of them doubling over each other, being relatively parallel, was bothering me. So I was trying to find different ways. But then I remembered that these little corner roof pieces work or exist, And they worked pretty well there. And you can't see them from the front technically, but they actually added a nice little feature. And I was really excited that I was able to remember that that even existed. And you can see one thing that I like to do a lot, because I have a general idea of where I want to put this, right? I want this to be a Victorian build. I know roughly in my brain what a Victorian build's going to look like. But sometimes when you're in it, when you're like physically like in the build, you lose track. So you see me backing up a lot. And I do recommend taking space from a build. That's something that I do a lot. I cut out a lot of it here, so it's not too long. But yeah, it just gives you a little bit of a different perspective. So if you have the ability when you're building to just kind of take a step back and look at the whole picture rather than just obsessing over one little piece, I think that's really important to consider. Here we are adding pillars. I always love pillars. Pillars are magical and beautiful, and they add amazing detail. Again, we only have the default pillars. I really wish they would have added new pieces, but for this particular build, I actually think it worked pretty well. Here I am just kind of adding supports, making sure that things kind of make sense. Also, I start to notice here, I don't know if y'all saw in one of the new updates that came out this last week, the devs actually made it so if you are building, supports are completely different. So like previously, if you had a foundation and you wanted to connect it's technically a ceiling, but you wanted to connect a floor or something or stairs from that foundation, you could connect 3 max items from one main foundation before hitting the load-bearing warning. So now, and this is something I think I realize soon, because I'll fix the front entrance. But now basically all you need is one foundation and you can connect anything and everything. I did go over that in my stream a little bit, and I'm doing this really kind of wild waterfall build. It's actually pretty cool. I'll end up posting a walkthrough video of it eventually, but obviously I'm doing the building on stream. So that's why it's really important to come to stream on Twitch if you would like. We're very yappy. But yeah, supports are just wild now. They make no sense, which bothers me slightly because, I'm adding pillars because I feel like they need to be there for supports, but like technically they don't. Technically you could just like have one foundation and a massive floating space. So it's definitely going to lend itself to like more creative builds, but as the type of builder that I am, I want that like realness a little bit more. So I do still try to make the supports look realistic. And here I go really far away and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot, right? I'm in an Eternal Land. I can do whatever. Now what I'm doing right here is actually something that I learned in The Sims. There's one particular saucer light that I always use, and I think most simmers use to just kind of light up the space. Those lights, some of them do actually stay, because I was like, hey, I don't entirely hate this, especially for a Victorian build. But some of them do get removed. But it's nice just to be able to see the space, because it does get pretty dark inside. I wanted it to be that way. Like I said, I added more walls interior wise than I would normally, just because I wanted it to be more authentic Victorian. I will say I tried really hard to not go to my default paint. I really wanted this paint to work. The problem with this paint for me is that it is a little bit more textured. So when you stack it, you can see the lines of the paint. So I'm kind of going through trying to figure out which paint would work the best, and I do end up going back to my default, which I think I pick in a moment or two. Yeah. It's just the best free-to-play paint. I don't know. I really do like the white one. I really like the brick one. Those don't look Victorian. Those don't fit Victorian for me. At least the white one didn't fit this like kind of creepy autumn gothic vibe I was going for. But this charcoal gray is just so perfect. It works really well for me. I really like it. I use it in like the regular game, even when I have access to so many other prints. It's just a really great base, and I think it gives me the kind of darker vibe that I was going for. So here I am kind of trying to add a little bit more detail. Again, keeping in mind that it is Victorian. Victorian is, I would say this is not a straight Victorian build, so don't like come for me. You're like, actually, that's not right. It's inspired by Victorian builds, because I do think that this one went in a little bit of a different direction. I think what I'll end up doing is a Victorian build at some point in the future that actually uses other in-game stuff. Real quick, I do talk about the white roofing print a lot. This gray one's also free, and so is that rusted red one. I tried it for a second. I was like, this isn't going to work. But I actually really like this black one, and I like the black with the brick edges. I went with the brick edges, well, the brick bases for the roofs again, which I do pretty often because I do feel like the finishing of those looks a little bit better. But yeah, we're kind of getting to the point where the outside, as far as the paint and the structures, are as done as I can. Here is where I realize, oh my goodness, the new update means I literally can move the foundations in the direction that I want them to go. And as someone who all of the floors going different directions drives me absolutely bananas. I love this. So here I'm like, oh my goodness. And I can even, so I had originally placed those 2 half blocks in order to place the 1 pillar. So you can actually cheese stuff like that. So you can put it down, get the pillar, because the pillar has to go in between like 2 connections. So you can cheese it by putting that down, and then you can remove it and put a regular foundation down in the future. Here I am playing with trees because I can. I would love to be able to do this. I want trees. I own both tree sets. We recently were able to get a bunch of in-game currency through being in the social media program that allowed me to give away the newer tree set, which is really cool. But all of the trees have these rock foundations on them, and they're really beautiful. They make a really beautiful, like, typical garden. But I would love to have more control over placement of trees, whether we like could grow them and then place them, or I don't even know exactly what it would be, but I would absolutely love to have that because like for this particular build outside, I'm able to kind of put the like more folly looking trees around, and that just like makes it for me. So here I am. We are painting the inside. We're getting pretty close to the end. So I decided to bring that smooth gray concrete back in, and I really wanted to use the wainscoting. So we do use the wainscoting in a couple different places. I will say that I don't like when I can't continue a print above it. I would love to have, for the wainscoting, I would love to have a solid blue option without the crown molding, the like top white line, because it looks like crap if you stack it. Let's be honest. You can't have a double high wall and it look good. So the different parts where I'm making it full gray, that's just because they're double high walls. That's just how it works. Then I'm like, oh, there's this other ceiling. It's kind of like a brown leather, which like if you think about it too hard, kind of weird. But I feel like that fit. Again, I feel like it fit for Victorian builds. So I'm kind of just placing that around, and yeah, we're getting close to. We did a little bit of a walkthrough this time, right before we get into the actual decor. And like I said, some of this does change. I do move some things around. I do add some additional foundations and walls in places just because the space wasn't working entirely how I felt I wanted it to work. But yeah, I had a lot of fun building this. It definitely challenged my brain a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what I want to build next, but I'm really excited about these builds. I'm glad that people are enjoying them, and yeah, here we are doing a little walkthrough. So I'm just kind of getting a feel of what the space looks like empty. So that's going to end up being the living room. That area out there will be a bar. We have a bathroom downstairs. This is like our our like office area. And look at that view. Eternal End's so cool. In this room ends up being the bedroom and the upstairs bathroom. That's one of the wall glitches that's currently going on right now in the game. Still happening. This floor ends up being the work floor. So this is the floor that gets the most work just because all the things I wanted would not fit into this little room in here. But again, if you want to see that, make sure that you do check out part 2. I really do appreciate any love and support that y'all can throw my way, whether it's a subscribe, words are hard, a follow, a comment, come over and say hi on Twitch. The next video will be out shortly after this one. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you all have a great week. And we got to end with seaweed.